Good to be with you. I'm Simone D'Alba. On Tuesday, August 4th, Virginians will decide which candidates advance to the November midterms. All 11 incumbents in the U.S. House of Representatives are seeking re-election. 2 are facing challenges within their parties. One of them is Democrat Don Beyer from District 8. We spoke with Mr. Beyer and his Democratic challengers. We begin with Mo Saifeddin. Mr. Saifeddin served on the Alexandria City Council from 2019 to 2021. He is a former attorney at the U.S. Department of Labor, and he served on nonprofit boards working to expand healthcare access in Sudan. Welcome, Mr. Saifeddin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you.
This is a really good opportunity for our viewers to get to know you. And I wanted to talk about this because you previously worked on the Alexandria City Council and you just resigned as a lawyer in the federal government in protest of the Trump administration. Why did you make that decision and why now?
Yeah, well, for 2 reasons. It's the affordability crisis and the accountability crisis. I saw what the Trump administration did to our democracy and our civil servants, and then the memo started coming down as to what the department was going to be doing, and that's not why I became a lawyer. So I decided to take the fight to them, and that's why I decided to run for Congress.
Does it make your knees knock when you put in that resignation? I mean, surely, what was the moment you knew that you were resigning?
Yeah, you know, making a decision like that is not easy. I am a caretaker of 2 elderly parents, so it's a financial burden. But, you know, I came to this country as a refugee fleeing a dictatorship, and what I saw this administration doing followed that sort of playbook, and I was not going to stand for it. I already fled one country. I was not going to flee another. And that's why the decision wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right decision to make. I was going to step up and make sure that I protect my community, my family, and the democracy and the nation that gave me safe haven.
I wanted to build off of what you just said because you first arrived in Virginia as a Sudanese refugee in middle school.
That's correct. Yeah, I went to
a child. And so, well, you know, how has that shaped how you want to be as a public servant?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You know, I came here not speaking the language at all, so having to learn that, I went to Luther Jackson Middle School in Fairfax County, and learning the language, the culture wasn't easy. But at the same time, I really had to grow up quickly as a first-generation immigrant. So at the age of 16, I had to work at McDonald's alongside my mom and siblings, and we're a big family. So when we actually worked at McDonald's, some people thought we owned the restaurant. But we just
and I was reading at one point, I mean, you all were lifting each other, right? Each of you had a paycheck of some kind, and you were trying to keep the family going.
Absolutely. So, you know, the fortunate part, we were a big family. We were able to take these, you know, low-ending jobs, minimum wage jobs, and everyone had a responsibility. So I had a responsibility since I was a child. But that also taught me a lot about growing up, responsibility, and becoming a leader. In fact, I became the youngest manager at that McDonald's. Which also taught me a lot, lessons about life itself and how to serve others. And also just fleeing a dictatorship, justice was really important to me and growing up. And that was also always part of my thoughts on how to serve my community.
Well, and you have a background, right, in public service. So we touched on this just a moment ago. You were the first Muslim and Sudanese American elected to Alexandria City Council. In what ways do you feel like has that prepared you for potentially moving to Congress?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it was the same place that George Washington once served as a councilman. A lot of people don't know that. It didn't actually make it to the movie, but of course he had a long life. But really, you know, having the opportunity to serve the community, it was an honor when we got to do a lot of things. One of the things that I worked on is housing affordability. We were able to purchase a building for $100 million to make sure that our firefighters and teachers could actually afford to live in the community that they serve in. We also made buses free, so Zohran, keep up, man. We made that 5 years ago, way before Zohran came into the scene, but that's what really tells you about people who have proven experience in standing up for working families, and that's what I've done, and I think that has prepared me to move on and serve the community in Congress.
Let's talk about that because you are challenging a well-established incumbent, to say the least, right? Congressman Beyer has been representing the 8th District for more than a decade. Why should Democrats vote to replace him?
Yeah, I think it's really, again, the accountability crisis and the affordability crisis. So when we talk about accountability, I mean Medicare for all, universal child care, and making sure that housing is stable. And those are the things that I will fight for. but also people are tired of politicians cozying up to the special interests and the corporate interests. And unfortunately, Mr. Beyer takes a lot of money from corporate interests, and I'll name just one. It's a HCA healthcare PAC. HCA healthcare PAC. This is one of the biggest corporations, or excuse me, hospitals coming together to form this corporation to make sure that we do not pass Medicare for all. And we called on the Congress member to stop taking money from the corporate PACs, and this is something that's supported by all of Americans, including Republicans and independents. So this is why we need new leadership in Congress.
So where is your money coming from?
Absolutely. My money is coming from everyday people, working families, even students. Low dollar amounts, no corporate PAC, no special interest. So I'm funded by the people, which is why I only answer to them, not the corporations. You know, corporations may be good to some people, and they've done some things to make our lives better, but they're overstepping in controlling our politicians and government. So that's why we need to make sure that we have finance reform as well.
Let's talk about your top priorities. If voters send you to Congress, what are the first two priorities that you would pursue, and why those first?
Yes, so the accountability part is making sure that we impeach the president for all the violations that he has done, from the emolument clause, killing innocent civilians on our streets through ICE, and killing, fisher men on international waters, and then using the purse to kind of enrich himself and his family. That's the first thing we do when we take the House in 2028. And then after that, we address the affordability crisis. And for me, is Medicare for all. It has to be the #1 topic in 2028 for Democrats and for those vying for the presidency, to be president. And I will just mention one thing about Medicare for all. If we pass it right now, and this is according to independent research, it'll save us $450 billion annually and save 68,000 lives annually.
Well, it sounds great in theory. I don't think anyone would argue with you on that, but fundamentally, how do you pay for it?
Yeah, well, I think we just mentioned how you pay for it. It actually saves money if you implement it right now, and the research supports that. $450 billion annually saved, 68,000 lives saved. Even Libertarian, the Koch brothers foundations, ran a report as well, and they verified that it actually will save trillions over 10 years. So the reason it's not getting done, it is because both sides of the aisle are taking money from corporate interests, and that's why we really got to tackle that issue. It is the root of a lot of problems in politics, but it's doable, and it saves life. I'm not sure why it wouldn't be the #1 topic. It just makes sense.
My immediate thought coming to mind is, where would you get bipartisan support for that?
Yeah, most of the good thing is that most Americans support it. So again, it's the issue
but
of
they're representatives in Congress. I'm thinking of your Republican counterparts. How do you get them on board with something, as polarizing as universal health care? What would your strategy be?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I don't think it's polarizing, given that the reports show that most Americans support it. Again, this is where we have a disconnect from the wealthy class and the political class not really following what the people want. So the way to do that is to slowly change the makeup of the political elites, and electing more for Congress is one of them, and other people are doing the same thing. We've seen upsets in New York and Colorado and California. So that's one way to do it. But also the numbers support it. It makes sense. We have to make sure that we become the party of the working people, not the corporate interest people.
Let's talk about the economy and affordability, because we know this is something that matters to voters quite a bit. When we talk to voters, they say affordability remains their biggest concern. This is what keeps them up at night, right? From housing to groceries, childcare is so expensive. What's the one policy you believe would make the biggest difference for families in Northern Virginia?
Yeah, in addition to Medicare, which will decouple your life from your work, that's one way. The other really thing we're talking about is child care, which is a huge expense for people here in Arlington, Alexandria. In fact, Arlington has the highest child care rate in the country. Alexandria is top 5. That's basically parents are paying the price of a college degree over 5 years for child care, which is unsustainable. So passing universal child care is the way to go. New Mexico has done it. We've had it during World War II, so it's something that is doable. Our peer nations have it as well. So this is, again, are we going to be the party of the working people or the corporate interests? This will also launch innovation and allow more people to go to work, and people start businesses. Even small business owners support it as well. So it's a net positive, and we should do it. But again, I go back to tackling the the corporate interest crisis in our politics.
Let's also talk about Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah.
Many experts say Social Security and Medicare face, long-term financial challenges. This we know, right?
Yeah.
How would you propose fixing it?
Yeah, so I think we talk about capping, and that way Medicare can be sustained for a longer time. So this is something that we've been talking about for quite a bit. Yeah.
Would you support raising taxes?
Depend on which bracket we're talking about. So if we're talking about the upper class that are really paying their fair share, that we would do so, yes.
Okay, meaning, well, I mean, there's a lot of high earners in Northern Virginia,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so your goal, if I'm hearing you correctly, and tell me if I'm right, you're trying to avoid increasing tax on the middle class. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There's no reason to do that because right now with the one ugly bill that the administration has passed, is giving tax breaks to the wealthiest. And that money has to come from somewhere. So we end up subsidizing the companies. That's the working class, everyday people, everyday Joes are basically subsidizing that tax break. And it's not fair, so we have to make sure that we work the IRS code, make sure that the tax dodging billionaires are paying their fair share. So everyday people can have a life and live with dignity.
Let's talk about immigration because, of course, it remains one of the most divisive topics that we are facing here in the United States. You have previously called for major changes to ICE. What would immigration enforcement look like under your vision?
Absolutely. So let's be clear that as a former federal attorney who did enforcement, what ICE is doing is not enforcement. It's extrajudicial killing of Americans without due process, which is illegal and unconstitutional. Therefore, I propose abolishing the agency because there's just no trust in it. And once people lose trust in the government, then we have a bigger problem.
Okay,
so
I want to walk you back. So
Yes.
I hear you say you support abolishing ICE.
Yes.
Do you support more ICE reform before we get to the abolishment point? So more body cameras, things like that, less road stops, less traffic stops. Do you, or are you kind of to the point where you're like, no, forget all that. I want to just simply abolish.
Yeah. Well, you cannot reform this agency. It's killing people in broad daylight. We've already seen them kill people on cameras and nothing has been done about it. In fact, the president and his administration call those people terrorists. So you can't really reform that. You have the videos. You're not doing anything to prosecute them. I think we get rid of ICE, we come up with a new agency, and then make sure that it's focused on humanely enforcing the laws that we have and get away from this bad brand. I will tell you that ICE, since its formation during the Bush era, has had a budget of over $400 billion and hasn't achieved its objective. From a fiscal point of view, it makes no sense. From a humane perspective, it makes no sense. From a legal perspective, it is awful. It has to be stopped.
Do you support deporting people who are in the country illegally and have been convicted of violent crimes?
So if you've been convicted of a violent crime and you go through due process and then the court determines that you must leave, then I support that as an attorney. But I do not support rounding up people randomly on the street and making up fake charges to send them off and not following court rules. This agency has been called out by judges all over the country that this should be a headline in every news station or paper that the presidency or the executive branch is not following judicial orders, which is a constitutional crisis.
To put a bow on it, how would you balance stronger border security with immigration reform in practical terms? So in something that you would tell people who could be voting for you?
Yeah, so look, I say people vote your conscience, but again, this nation is a nation of immigrants. It cannot function without immigrants. Immigrants are a net positive to this country. They put more into the system than take out and they commit less crimes. They do a lot of jobs that make sure that we function from, professional jobs to everyday jobs that me and my family worked on. So the issue really we shouldn't be focusing on red, blue, immigrant or not is, are we tackling the affordability crisis and making sure that the 1% who got us to this point are paying their fair share?
I think I missed, how would you balance stronger border security? So what would you do in that arena?
Yeah, I think we continue enforcing. As a former federal agency, former federal attorney, we do enforcement, but we do it the right way and the humane way. This court right now, this administration is not following the law. So we got to get back to basic things, follow the law, and we welcome people that want to be here and do it the correct way.
We're running out of time. I wanted to get this question in as well. Iran, tell me what you think about the current conflict.
Well, first of all, this is an illegal war. It's an unconstitutional war. And even if there was a presentation to Congress to take us to war, I don't think it's the right decision. This is the most damage that the U.S. has sustained since Pearl Harbor. This is an ill-thought war. It's not a war that we want to go on. and it has to be stopped.
How do we get out of Iran,
Yeah.
in your opinion?
Yeah, well, we shouldn't be there to begin with, but I think we go back to the Obama frame of make sure that Iran, following international law as far as enriching their uranium, and making sure that we slowly lift the sanction on them so they become part of the international community. But we cannot bomb our way out of this or into making sure that they submit to us. It just hasn't worked, and it's not going to.
In closing, if you win and are elected to Congress, how would you work with the president and your Republican counterparts in a bipartisan sense, to get some work done?
Yeah. I think you're right. Politics is the art of getting to a yes, and I've shown through my work at the Alexandria City Council that we can do that. So we will make sure that we extend an olive branch to tackle the affordability crisis and also the accountability crisis. And if folks are willing to work with us, we will work with them. But if folks want to, subvert the Constitution and go the other way around, sometimes I believe in speaking their language, and that's why I think we need new leadership in Congress, because some of the Democrats right now are too passive in their opposition. I'm a fighter, and I've shown that throughout my career.
Final word, anything I've missed that you'd like to add?
Yes, vote more for Congress. Visit our website, moreforcongress.com. Look, if you're looking for change, if you're looking for new leadership to address the affordability and the accountability crisis, it's time for new leadership. The old ways aren't working, and we've seen the consequences of that. So I think it's time to send new fighters to Congress, and I've shown that I can do that throughout my career. My whole career has been about public service, and I want to continue that. I'll be honored to serve Virginia's 8th District in Congress.
All right. Mr. Saifuddin, really appreciate you coming in to talk with me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Happening right now, we are talking with Michael Duffin. He is a national security expert who worked 12 years at the State Department until he lost his job last summer because of DOJ cuts. Before working for the federal government, he was a teacher and he was a journalist. Mr. Duffin, thank you so much for coming in today. Certainly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, let's talk about, why you've decided to run for office. This is your first time running. Bring us into the thought behind that and how it's going.
As a nonpartisan public servant, I intended to spend my entire career working for the federal government. I come from a long line of public servants. My father was a cop, my grandfather was a firefighter, and so this is part of my identity, and I did not aspire to run for public office. When 1,300 of my colleagues, including myself, were laid off last July, I felt that our representatives weren't fighting hard enough, and running for office would be a way to keep our story, our narrative in the spotlight.
Now, you've made this a cornerstone of your campaign, representing, those who have been impacted by the DOJ cuts. There have been a significant number of those in Northern Virginia specifically, and you were working in counterterrorism, is that correct?
Yes.
What was that moment like when you were let go?
Since 9/11, in the 24 years since, and this September we have the 25th anniversary, we've had a continuous, we've had nonpartisan public servants protecting across multiple administrations. And so I had presumed that this administration would continue to support counterterrorism. And I was shocked that they would let DOJ gut the Bureau of Counterterrorism and our counterparts at DHS and other agencies.
Let's talk about, if you're elected, what are the two things that you would focus on right out at the gate?
First thing is getting federal employees, those who were fired, reinstated, and then advocating for term limits and campaign finance reform.
I wanted to touch on that because getting them reinstated, through your experience trying to navigate the system, has been tricky, if not difficult at best. I was reading you were saying a lot of them are either promoted from within or shuffled around different departments. And so has that been kind of what you've seen in terms of people aren't getting reinstated, they're getting hired from around different departments?
In theory, the way it used to work before this administration, when someone would be impacted by reduction in force, they would be allowed to apply for open positions, including within their own agency. And with the State Department, they've gone on a hiring, they're hiring again, but it's internal applicants only. And so we have been excluded from applying for jobs. In some cases, people have been excluded from applying for the jobs that they had, the same office where they had worked.
I wanted to talk about this. You have said incumbent Congressman Don Beyer and other Democrats have not done enough to push back against DOJ's dismantling of the federal workforce, and that reinstating fired federal workers right, as you kind of talked about, would be a central issue for you. I wanted to go back to the topic about Don Beyer not pushing hard enough. How would you advocate differently?
Because this has impacted me personally, because people on my block in my neighborhood have lost their jobs, I see the moving trucks everywhere, and it could impact my family as well. I want to make sure that our representative, whether it's myself or Representative Beyer, is thinking about the families, the dedicated public servants who are impacted by this every moment. And I feel that he and a lot of other members of Congress, they have the memories of goldfish. We meet with them, they acknowledge our concerns, and then they focus on something else, and they're forgetting tomorrow, they're forgetting about us. And so if you look at the amount of time that I've spent engaging the media talking about federal employees, it far exceeds the amount of time he spent advocating for us, and he's our sitting representative.
You are a father, you have young kids. Again, you live in Northern Virginia, and we're talking about housing costs, job security. What are your actual ideas to help people who are hurting? Because we hear this affordability crisis. People talk about it. The cost of living's too high, inflation's too high, making ends meet is very difficult. How would you address some of those concerns?
Well, the first thing, I would put a cap on credit card APR. I would also put a cap on copays for people who have health insurance and ensure that we have the proper subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. I took my 2-year-old to the doctor last week twice. It was a $35 copay, and so the more you go to the doctor, the more you have to pay out of pocket. And in my case, I had to use a credit card that has a 29% APR. And so if I and others who have similar situations, which is most people, have to use that credit card and they don't pay it off at the end of the month, that is a predatory loan. So I want to make sure that people who are trying to get by are not taken advantage by the system.
Let's talk about Iran. Given your counterterrorism background, what is your read on the war with Iran? Can you elaborate on that?
It was foolish to get involved in this war. It's empowered them, it's emboldened them. Iran has a terrorist, a proxy network around the world. And so they could strike us and our allies anywhere, and that's concerning. And so Iran, instead of diminishing their capability to harm us, it's highlighted a blueprint for weakening or identifying the Achilles heel of the United States, and that's the economy. Shutting down the Straits of Hormuz is a weak point, is the Achilles heel for us, and so they can really shut down our economy or impact our economy by just lobbing drones and missiles at these oil tankers and shutting down the shipping lanes. And
how would you propose exiting the war, getting out of it?
We have to take diplomacy seriously, and having two people who have business ties, Witkoff and Jared Kushner, leading our diplomacy, that is not an effective way to conduct it. There are competent Republican national security officials who could lead our diplomacy on behalf of the Trump administration. Those people who served in the first Trump administration, many of them have not returned, either because they didn't want to or because of political rhetoric. But point is, we need to identify the most competent people to engage in diplomacy and recognize that it's not going to be accomplished in a half day, a week, or even a month. This is going to take perhaps several years to adequately negotiate a treaty.
Let's talk about health care. That is a top of mind for many of our Virginia voters. ACA subsidies expired back in January, and a lot of people have seen their premiums spike, in some cases double. Some of them have gone up by about 100%. Really scary numbers, right? And so what's your proposal there? How would you address the health care crisis?
I and other Democrats believe in universal health care as a long-term goal. I want to make sure that we have tangible progress to alleviate costs. And so I want to in addition to putting a cap on copays, I want to put a cap on essential medicines at $100 is a lot, but in many cases there are medications that children, constituents need that cost $500, and because the health insurance companies have deemed them non-essential, People who need a certain topical cream or certain medication have to pay exorbitant amounts.
So what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, in the short term you would want to cap something like copays, like you said, cap it, so that would be immediate relief for families. And then in the long term, you're also on board with universal health care.
Yes.
Okay, a lot of the candidates we have spoken with are also echoing that sentiment. Have you given thought to how that would be paid for?
It's, we would have, I believe in a fair tax system.
Okay.
And so it would, I don't think we have enough time to talk about the full extent of it, but there are corporations and there are billionaires who haven't been paying their fair share. And so I would want to begin a discussion with other lawmakers, including Republicans, to ensure that we have a fair, equitable tax system. And right now we don't.
Let's talk about immigration. I'm curious about your current thoughts on ICE, the immigration system in general. Can you elaborate on that?
I and others have said we want to abolish ICE. We need an immigration system. The people who have not broken the law, who have not violated civil rights and civil liberties, their institutional knowledge is essential to enforcing our immigration system. Our system's broken, and so this is not just on the Trump administration. This is multiple administrations going back have failed to pass comprehensive immigration reform. We need more judges. We need more people adjudicating cases. And we need to, even if people have broken the law, they deserve a fair trial, and right now that's not happening.
Let's talk about data centers, right? We know this is an important topic. They're framed as necessary infrastructure for AI, economic growth, but critics are pointing to environmental impact, energy cost, community pushback we're seeing a lot of. Where do you fall on this, and what role should the federal government play in it?
I believe communities should have a say in what is being built in their communities, especially when it impacts their utility costs and impacts the quality of the air they breathe and the water they drink. And so these data centers have essentially in the Commonwealth sprung up overnight, and we're seeing dramatic increases in our energy costs. And so I want to ensure that if they're going to go up in the 8th District or elsewhere, that community members have an opportunity to participate in the planning. And perhaps this would require a referendum. But essentially, we're in a competition with China and other countries on AI, and they are building quantum computing that can crack our encryption codes. It's complicated. It's a complicated issue, but we need to ensure that we have we're the leaders in technology. So I believe in AI, but we need to have protections for consumers and the taxi drivers, the people who are working for Uber and Grubhub and other delivery services, because those jobs are essential, and we have no plans to address their loss of income.
Let's talk about party strategy, because something that we have heard echoed time and time again is that some voters do not think that Democrats are fighting the Trump administration hard enough. Does the party's approach need to change?
I'm a part of the Democratic Party, but I am one of the loudest critics. I feel left behind by my party, and I know that voters in some of the swing states have felt that way, and that's why Donald Trump has been elected twice. And he flipped states that President Obama won in 2008. So we need to have a dialogue with working class people, middle class people who are struggling. And when there are complicated issues like immigration or data centers, it's really hard for the average person to understand what's happening. And we need politicians who can articulate why these issues matter and why we need solutions, not slogans.
Would you be able to work with the Trump administration if you were put into office? I mean, this requires a lot of bipartisanship, handshaking with Republicans, some of whom, cost you your job. Would you be capable of doing that?
Yes, and absolutely. To pass any legislation, including universal health care, we need Republican votes. I do not believe we're going to get rid of the filibuster, because that would work against Democrats if they retake the White House and both houses. So it's important to get as many Republican members of Congress and the public on board with what we're trying to do, because strong-arming the population, strong-arming the other side is ineffective.
As we put a bow on our conversation, and as voters are still getting to know you, what final words would you leave them with?
I care deeply about public service, and this is not about advancing my personal career. I'm trying to give a voice to the people who dedicated their lives to serving our country, and they're losing their homes, they've lost their health care. People are in danger of losing, going into significant debt that they may not climb out of in a year or a decade. And so I am advocating for them, and I'm also planting seeds for the future, because we need a competent public service to serve America. And right now, there's too much rhetoric maligning us, and we need people like me to push back.
All right. Certainly appreciate the time and the conversation, Mr. Duffin. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Don Beyer has served the people of Virginia's 8th Congressional District for 6 terms. Now he's going for number 7. Before that, he was Lieutenant Governor of Virginia and Ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein. He is currently an upperclassman at George Mason University, working toward a master's degree in machine learning, which has quite a bit to do with AI, which we'll dive into. Welcome, Mr. Beyer. Glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Simone. Thanks for the invitation.
Let's talk about you being a student. So what are you studying right now?
Well, I finally got into the graduate courses. I had to take a bunch of undergraduate computer science, so I didn't know them before. But it's very challenging. Yeah. I love my classmates. The professors are very good. And hopefully in 2 years or so, I'll actually have that degree.
You know, as you learn more about AI, I mean, does it make you more nervous? Does it make you embrace it more? What's it been like to study it up close?
It's been, the most important thing I think is it's gotten me in the room with the most important AI leaders in the country right now. The computer science skills I have will not allow me to be an AI leader, but I'm hoping that the mixture, along with the congressional service, I can have an impact on what AI does to our jobs, to our healthcare, even to our safety.
Well, speaking of that, data centers, synonymous with AI in many ways. Your data center bill essentially tries to protect the ratepayers, right? So it tries to stop residential ratepayers from subsidizing big tech's electricity, their power needs. The Trump administration's answer to this was a voluntary pledge from companies like Google and OpenAI to essentially fund their own infrastructure. My question to you, is voluntary enough, or does this need to be made into law?
I don't think voluntary is enough, because you will get good players. You know, maybe a Google or an Anthropic that will do that. But there'll be a lot of other people in the data center space. We've had data centers around for quite a while. They grew up in Loudoun County in the 90s and the 2000s. But now that they're exploding, we have many, many different players. It needs to be in the law.
Let's talk about, in community debates and forums, something that your competitors in this primary, an issue that they have raised, is that it's time to let somebody else hold the office, to pass the torch, so to speak, to a new generation of leadership. What's your reaction to that?
I think that's always a fair thing to raise. But I feel young, vibrant. I mean, as I'm studying, I just finished the Appalachian Trail last year. And I really am excited. We have the opportunity to take back the Democrats, the House, and even possibly the Senate this year. So legislation I've worked on for a number of years that's ready to go. It will never pass in a Donald Trump or a Mike Johnson House. But so I'm eager to actually get closure on some of these things.
So what can you accomplish with another term as you look forward, to the primary? If voters send you back to Washington, what are you looking forward to accomplishing that you have not yet done?
Well, we very much want to do affordability. Right now, you have 2/3 of Americans that can't afford their groceries. Overwhelming number of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. I have the lead of one of the most important bills to take back tariff authority from Donald Trump to the Congress. Like the 50% tariff he announced last week against Canada. These are crazy things that are driving up costs for everyone. I am the co-lead of the big bill on low-income housing tax credits, which, if we can pass it next year, will be 2 million more homes over the next 8 years. And I've been leading the effort on fusion energy for the last 4 or 5 years. We can actually pass that next year, which will bring us much closer to having much lower energy costs for all Americans for the rest of our lives.
You know, I wanted to build off of what you were just saying, because something that we just hear consistently from Virginia voters is affordability, affordability. It's too high. You know, we can't afford to live in this community. Inflation, housing, groceries, childcare. You have argued for expanding the child tax credit, building more affordable housing, as you were talking about, raising the minimum wage, and requiring wealthy Americans to pay more in taxes. What is the single biggest thing Congress can do that would actually put more money back into your constituents' pockets?
I think that the biggest single thing would probably be first taking AI and making it human-centered. You know, the great fear right now is it could eliminate some millions of jobs. We can't let that happen. We also need to raise the average income that people have. When so many people have been left behind, you mentioned I was ambassador to Switzerland. When I left there 13 years ago, the average minimum wage was $48,000 a year. So they didn't have a lot of transfer payments. They didn't have lots of things like SNAP benefits and Medicaid because people could afford it. So what we need to do is rethink what capitalism means in the 21st century in America and make sure everybody can work full-time and have enough to live.
How vital is bipartisanship to that?
Very, very bipartisan, very necessary. You know, the things that we do just one party at a time, the next party they get in power and they try to reverse it.
They dismantle it,
and the things that have lasted are things we did together.
I wanted to talk to you. I've been speaking with some of your primary opponents in this Democratic primary coming up. 3 of your primary opponents have pledged not to accept corporate PAC money. They've pledged to support banning congressional stock trading, and they've made your fundraising a central issue in this race. You are one of the wealthiest members of Congress. If you have the personal resources to self-fund, why continue to accept corporate PAC money?
Well, first of all, corporate PAC money is not that much different. It's not corporations. It's the people who work in the corporations, who work in businesses. And that's the way they have a voice. They can give their $25 or their $100 through their corporate political action committee. Those corporate PACs, as they call them, are the same as the labor PACs and the PACs of the doctors and the dentists and the nurses and the airline pilots. Also, I'm all for getting money out of politics. But as long as Republicans can accept the PAC money, it's crazy for us to unilaterally disarm. One of the things my opponents typically don't mention is I spend almost none of that money on my campaigns. I give it all to people who are running in very poor districts across the country. So I have been the biggest giver, certainly in this area, for the longest time.
So with some of the corporate PACs, so I hear you generally employee-funded PACs are also part of your campaign finance. If we're talking about maybe some of the defense ones, those corporate PACs, why should voters believe that those donations don't influence your priorities? What would you say to them who might be nervous?
Well, no one can point to a single vote I've taken in the last 11 and a half years that has been tied to a specific gift or even a category of gifts. First of all, even those corporate PACs, like let's think BAE or Boeing, those are the employees that are giving the money, not the corporations that are doing it.
Okay.
By the way, I give money, a lot of this money is going to Democratic candidates around the country who don't take PAC money of any kind. They're happy to take it from me.
I see.
And when we can ban that, then I would be happy to live up to that. But literally to say Republicans can do this and we can't puts us at an enormous disadvantage.
All right, let's talk about Iran, war powers. I wanted to touch on this because you supported the Iran war powers resolution. You've called on Congress to withhold the administration's $90 billion in funding request until there's a clear path to peace. How do we get out of Iran, in your opinion? As you look forward, you know, to the months ahead, what comes to mind here?
We have to go back to the diplomatic table, the negotiating table. You mentioned I was ambassador in Switzerland, and I was a part, not the central part, of the negotiations with China, Russia, Germany, France, and England, and the United States to get the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. That was the big treaty that we got done in 2016 that kept them from getting nuclear weapons for the decades to come and brought peace. Donald Trump tore it up in 2017. We need to recreate that, and that's the only thing that's going to bring peace. Otherwise, this kinetic thing, dropping bombs on each other, is 6 months today. Well, and it could go on forever.
I thought it was interesting. You've said, you know, the president and Mr. Hegseth, Pete Hegseth, have no idea what the plan is to end the war. Concerning to you, to say the least. Yes, can you elaborate on that?
Well, they said 2 weeks, and now it's 6 months.
Right.
And Iran says they don't want to come back to the table, although they will, because they know they need to. Yeah, in the meantime, we've used up an enormous amount of our stocks and military supplies that, according to General Dan Kane, could take it decades to rebuild.
You have voted in regard to Israel. You have voted to restrict some U.S. security assistance to Israel and said the U.S.-Israel relationship needs to be reevaluated. What should that relationship look like going forward, in your opinion?
I think we need to change the leadership in Israel. Israel has to change it. They have an election coming up on October 27th. I want Israel to succeed. I want there to be a strong Jewish democracy. I have many wonderful, wonderful, dear American Jewish friends. But I'm concerned about the rise in anti-Semitism here in America and around the world, driven by Netanyahu's policies. The way they waged the war in Gaza, and the way they don't protect the Palestinians in the West Bank, and the bombing of Beirut, all have driven most nations away from Israel. We need to change that.
Should future military aid be conditioned on Israel's actions in Gaza specifically?
Or overall. I wouldn't say Gaza specifically, but the overall relationship. It's taken us a long time to get to conditioning aid to Israel. It's been unconditional for decades and decades. But we've also seen that without asking them to live up to the values I think we share, things have gone in the wrong direction.
All right, let's talk about health care. That is a primary concern for many of our voters. Health insurance costs are rising after the expiration of enhanced ACA subsidies. You have supported both Medicare for All and the Choose Medicare Act, which would allow people to buy into Medicare. Given the political reality in Congress, which approach is achievable and how would it lower costs for families?
Well, if you could actually get Medicare for All, which is a single-payer system, like much of the rest of the world has, it would dramatically drop costs. First of all, a significant percentage of the 20% of our GDP we spend on healthcare, it goes to profit for insurance companies. That would completely get out of it.
How do you
get
pay
rid of
for
so
it?
much of the fraud.
What would your proposal be to pay for something like that?
Well, first of all, I always liked Teddy Kennedy's idea, which is you took this Medicare age, which is 65 right now, and you drop it to 64 this year and 63 the next year, and you phase it in. You actually then save a great deal of money. Because by the time people get on Medicare, they're often so sick that they end up using many more resources than they have before. We also have to drop back and look and say, so much of our 20% of GDP, why not make it 14 or 12%, which you could do by the efficiencies of not having all the insurance companies and the big hospital centers into it.
So what I'm hearing you say is not an obvious, I would raise taxes egregiously in order to pay for it.
No, I don't think, people are paying that money already.
Okay.
I mean, it's going out. For example, I just think about it as a small business person in the DC area for a long, long time. A big part of our expenses are health care for the employees. All of a sudden, that would go away, which means people could then, I could use that money not to raise profits, but to drop prices for the customers, or even better, to raise incomes for the employees.
Let's talk about federal layoffs. Your Democratic primary opponent, Michael Duffin, is a former employee. He was an employee with the state. He was laid off in the DOGE cuts. He says your response to the federal workforce cuts fell short. He said Northern Virginia needed a fighter and that reinstating fired federal workers hasn't been a central part of your legislative agenda. Would you like to respond to that?
I think Michael thinks that he can get elected and everyone will be hired back. Unfortunately, we live in a democracy, and right now one that's controlled by the Republicans in both the House and the Senate. I've done everything anybody has ever suggested that I do. I've held job fairs, I've had resource fairs, we've done training. I have major pieces of legislation that would hire back those employees, but we live in a Congress that's run by Republican Mike Johnson, so they haven't passed.
I've got to ask you about ICE, because you co-introduced the ICE Visibility Act requiring agents to wear clear identification during operations. How would this law change what people see on the ground? Would that really make enough of a difference, in your opinion?
No, it wouldn't make a total difference, but the three things that really upset people, number one is no names, you don't know who it is. Sure. Number two is the masks and the unidentified cars. We've never had that in 250 years. And number three is the warrantless entries, which clearly is unconstitutional. You've always been, even a law, police, if they want to come to your house, my house, have to get a warrant. But overall, we need to tear ICE down and rebuild it because the culture has gotten beyond belief.
I wanted to ask you about the Democratic Party. We hear from some voters who are saying very clearly that they do not think Democrats are doing a good enough job, let's say fighting President Trump on his policies, his legislative agenda. Do you think the party's approach needs to change? And if so, how?
I don't think so. I mean, there's always ways we can improve. We don't do things perfectly. I do sense a great deal of frustration among the people that I represent that we have not been able to stop the corruption and the excesses and the lawlessness of Donald Trump and the Pete Hegseths of the world. It's a frustration we all share. We also live in a land of laws, and we're under the rule of law. So unless we want to take to the streets with knives and guns and burning sticks, we have to go at it through the political process, which is why these elections are so very important.
Okay, as we put a bow on it, what would you say to voters in this final push ahead of the Democratic primary?
Well, very much the fulfilling part of my life is to be able to serve the voters of Northern Virginia and of the whole country. And I try to do the most thoughtful, meaningful things I can. I'm eager for a chance to try to finish that job.
All right, Mr. Beyer, thank you so much for joining me today. Certainly appreciate you being here and talking with us. Good luck in your studies as well.
Thank you very much, Simone.
All right, back to you. Adam Dunnigan joining us now. He is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran and a former CIA case officer who resigned to run for Congress. Welcome, Mr. Dunnigan. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Simone. Happy to be here.
We have a lot of time to talk and for our viewers to get to know you a little bit, but I wanted to start with this. You're a Harvard grad, a Marine Corps veteran, and you left a career in the CIA to run for Congress. Why did you make that decision?
Ooh, there's a million different factors in that, but mostly I couldn't stay behind the curtain watching the backslide of our democracy, the fracturing of American institutions. Somebody had to do something. There has to be adults back in the room in Congress. I didn't see any, so I figured if not me, then who?
Well, I thought this was really fascinating because on your Substack, you said that you blew up your life to do politics, even down to your 401k. Can you talk to me about that?
Yes, ma'am. So I was 3 years shy of 20 years of federal service between all my intelligence time and Marine Corps time. And I had a TSP from back in the Marine Corps, and I contributed to it from my CIA days. That was my retirement. But to get a political campaign off the ground and be taken seriously, Washington only respects money, so I decided to put my own skin in the game rather than court myself out to corporate donors. I think money should come clean, and so I use my own.
That's a lot of skin in the game.
Oh, yes, every day. I get nervous about it.
Sure, certainly. So I wanted to kind of build on that because when you left the CIA, you said, quote, "We aren't the good guys anymore." What is that? I mean, that was such a powerful statement that really stuck out to me. What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
I mean that the U.S. government, or the U.S. as a presence on the world stage in multilateral institutions like NATO and the UN, in bilateral relationships like with our allies in Europe, we have become the villains. You know, we launch trade wars needlessly. We launch actual wars like in Iran that sucks in the entire region. That war itself is going regional right now. We just put out a product this morning on that, trying to keep people educated. We are using the same tactics in that war that the Russian Federation uses to delay and degrade Ukraine. You know, we promise negotiations and then we resume bombing at our leisure. And we are no longer good faith actors on the world stage. It's just true, and I hate saying that. So I still have all the love in my heart for my colleagues back at CIA. I still respect, and I wish everybody did respect military service, but those instruments of hard and soft power are not being employed for the best interest of the American voter, of the American citizen, or the country in general. Our long future is at risk.
As a Marine, to say the words, "We aren't the good guys anymore," I mean, what was that like? What was that moment like?
Yeah, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. And I'm not a bleeding heart about these things too. I know there's a real politic that we have to do, and sometimes the job that I came out of, sometimes it's ugly, but it needs doing. Right now, the job that's getting done isn't serving the people that it needs to, and there is no long-term strategy. You know, I can say with some authority, given what I've seen, that there is a fundamental unseriousness in the people who lead this country right now. And that's not just the White House. You know, there's been a lack of curiosity even on the part of congressional Democrats that are in positions of oversight and accountability. You know, we had this war in Iran, for example. We had excuse me. We had this war in Iran, and Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff were out there negotiating as special envoys on behalf of the American citizen. They have never been called to account in front of Congress under oath to explain exactly what happened and when. There's been no accountability. And there are Democrats on the subcommittee in charge of oversight for special envoys. And there's not even been a protest lodged. There's not been a signaling motion. There's been nothing. And so I'm tired of the government being listless. You know, just because Democrats are out of power, it doesn't mean we have to be catatonic.
Speaking of that, I wanted to kind of build off of what you've been talking about in terms of our viewers getting to know you. So if you're elected into office, what are your first two priorities? What would you approach first?
money out of politics. I think corporate politics is killing us, and the influence of corporate donors at the expense of real people is unsustainable in this country.
Can I ask you about that, though? Because you said in an Instagram post that you would never take corporate PAC or special interest money.
Correct.
How do you build a campaign? You wanted to do small donations, correct? Small money donations. Do I have that correct? So can you elaborate on the plan there?
Yeah, I don't think people in power will argue this point, saying like, oh, well, there's good corporate money and bad corporate money, and not all special interests are bad. There's probably a wider conversation to have about that. The American people don't care, and perception is reality. So if you're in bed with defense tech or AI companies, especially here in Virginia, where they're selling our futures out to data centers, the people don't care about the nuance. They just can't trust politicians that take special interest or corporate money. So you build a campaign by getting real people to believe in you. Maybe with a CV like mine, people can believe in me, and I think our fundraising indicates that.
Well, I think of candidates like AOC, Bernie Sanders, right? They kind of have shown that it was possible to build campaigns off of those small donors. But they also benefited from national attention. They benefited, in some cases, from outside spending. What makes you confident that this model will work for you?
I'm never confident in anything in politics, but I think what makes me more optimistic is that it's part of a sanding process. We have to sand down all of the detritus that is accumulated in the American political process. You don't need Adam Dunnigan running in Virginia to do this. You need hundreds of people in a building full of 538 representatives and senators. You need all of them, or a vast majority, to follow the example being set. And I think we had a wave of that under the new Democrats, right? AOC is a good example. But we lost that momentum because we lost power again due to some short-sighted strategy on the part of the National Democratic Party. The momentum that was behind these grassroots candidates can come back, and I think it is. I think the results in New York for the DSA, Colorado, they bear out the possibility that you can do this, but we have to sustain it, and we can't keep losing to the Republicans if we want to build this party back.
Yeah, flipping Diana DeGette in Colorado was quite the political upset. You mentioned Iran. I wanted to take you back there. Given your military and intelligence background, what are your thoughts involving Iran and the conflict?
It's a nightmare. I put out tons of analysis on this. If anybody's curious, you can go to our campaign socials. It's just a fact that the U.S. government has been pitched this idea by several different actors, including Israeli governments, since Reagan, since Carter maybe. The idea of us taking out the Ayatollah in Iran has always been on the table, especially during the Iraq War. The reason it happened now is because we have fundamentally unserious and unqualified people in positions of power at the White House and the Pentagon. And we have a Congress that is paralyzed by petty infighting and corporate donors. The war itself, we haven't been shooting for a couple days, but that means nothing, because the policy coming out of the U.S. government generally is schizophrenic. And I don't know how to fix that without completely cleaning the table from the people who caused this. Anybody who sold us out, who created the situation, they all got to go. But anybody who let it happen on their watch, they got to go too. There has to be electoral consequences.
So let's say you get elected. Let's say, what is your path forward here in terms of the war with Iran? Do you think? How do you even begin to get out? What would your plan here be, in essence?
I think the sunlight is the best disinfectant on this. If we take the House and the Senate this time, and it is possible, it's going to be dicey, but it's possible, right? If we get electoral power back in Congress, the power of the purse is the best thing we can do. We can hold back the defense spending. We can rein in the Pentagon until 2028 comes around, and hopefully we get a Democratic president in 2028. That's not a guarantee either. And what really scares me is that the MAGA crowd can use this war to drum up support, wrap themselves in the flag, just like they did with Iraq, just like they did with Afghanistan. I fought in those wars. I understand the impulse behind people who want to support a wartime president. This is not the time to do it, and we need to get out. So getting out starts with the power of the purse in Congress.
Let's talk about Israel. Do you support continuing U.S. military aid to Israel? And should Congress place some kind of condition on that aid, in your opinion?
Yes. Well, no, I do not support continued military aid to Israel. Absolutely not. I am in favor of a phased reintroduction plan should that be cut. So I'm a pragmatist above all else. I do not want to abandon the only ally that we have in the region left at this point. We can't. We shouldn't. However, it is very clear that some of American foreign policy has been subordinated to the interests that are not our own. And it wouldn't matter if it was Canada doing the same thing, I would be against aid to Canada in the same way. It has nothing to do with the deeper history of that region. It has everything to do with tacitly endorsing the excesses of the IDF in Gaza and letting our own foreign policy get dog-walked into a war with Iran. There has to be consequences for that, and if there's not, I don't know how we come back from it.
Let's talk about the economy and affordability, because when we talk to voters, we're hearing time and time again, it's too expensive. The cost of living is just crippling, from housing to groceries to childcare. What's the one policy you believe would make the biggest difference for Virginia families?
Universal health care, 100%.
How would you pay for it?
Single-payer health care. You could close the tax loopholes that the data center companies are currently enjoying. AI companies are raking in profits and expanding massively, right? In neighborhoods that are often low income. One of the data centers that's being discussed and planned for my district is less than 100 feet away from residential area, and it's lower income residential area. So these people who can't get health care are living in the literal shadow of a system that cares not for their health.
Let me go back to that. So your route here for not raising taxes significantly by implementing universal health care would be to go the data center route and to use some of the revenue from there. Do I understand that?
Yes, but only in so much as we're already giving away about $2 billion a year in tax incentives to these companies to build here. We don't have to do that. It's not actually raising any taxes to just make billionaires, now trillionaires, and data center companies pay their fair share, just like every other company has to do.
Do you think people hear universal child care or universal health care, excuse me, and it makes voters nervous if they're more moderate? I mean, what's been your experience? And when you talk to people, Virginia voters, and you float that idea to them, what is their response?
It's overwhelmingly positive. I have not heard anybody get skittish when I say single-payer health care or universal health care. Okay. I do hear them get skittish when I say Medicare for all, because Medicare for all is a political brand at this point. And a lot of people, yeah, you're right, more centrist Democrats and center-right Republicans and MAGA, God help you, but they will lose their minds if they hear Medicare for all because they have these associations with it, whether that's political or factual or their experience with Medicare. I have not encountered significant resistance to the universal healthcare or single-payer healthcare. I think we have to go through with that.
Let's talk about, as we branch off on this topic a little bit, health insurance premiums and out-of-pocket costs. They're just rising, right? We're hearing families talk about this. Yep. You know, especially after we saw those pandemic-era subsidies evaporate and expire. What is your plan, again, to make healthcare more affordable in the short term?
In the short term, I think a restoration of the stipulations in the ACA that were gutted by this administration. Congress can do that. They can approve that. I think there's enough bipartisan support. There's enough people suffering, even in deep red districts around the country, that they could get behind this.
Okay, because that was my next question. If you have a combative, you know, no bipartisan support truly, I mean, is that a practical answer?
It is not. No, you need somebody who can operate in the margins. But I think part of that is just playing intellectual judo with the other side. We need to do politics again. You know, Republicans got really good at playing the worst kind of politics. We need to start doing actual politics again in the Democratic Party.
Intellectual judo in practice would look like
okay, we want progress on energy, right? We want to decouple from the petrochemical industry and remove the influence of oil as a motivator for American foreign policy. Well, right now you have the best excuse ever to get Republicans from the other side of the aisle behind green energy and renewable initiatives. Nuclear, we can have a nuclear renaissance if we have the momentum behind it. And we have the best evidence because nobody likes paying $7 a gallon for gas. And they all want to wash their conscience from what Trump did in Iran.
I hear what you're saying too about intellectual judo in terms of like bringing back old school politics of some decorum, some, you know, respect, things like that, and which leads me to immigration.
Yes, ma'am.
Very little bipartisan cooperation on that topic. It remains one of the country's most divisive issues, of course. How would you balance stronger border security with immigration reform? And do you have any comments on the current atmosphere with ICE?
First of all, ICE needs to be abolished wholesale. You cannot kill American citizens and black bag people off American streets and still be trusted by the American citizens or retain your mandate within the American government. I would not tolerate their continued existence. And whatever comes after them, proper vetting, proper training, and application against the actual problem. You know, you don't need to give a budget bigger than the Marine Corps to an immigration enforcement agency that is not serving the actual needs of immigration enforcement. By all metrics, they failed. And until we punish that failure by prosecuting the officers who have committed murders in their name and drumming out anybody who allowed the architecture to go so far afield from what we're supposed to do, we can't move forward. Actual immigration policy, yeah, we need to talk about amnesty again.
When you hear ICE beginning to implement things like body cameras and not doing, vehicle stops, does that, is that a kind of reform you can get behind in a short-term sense, or you're just across the board, hey, abolish ICE?
2 minutes too late, the brand is broken at this point. You can't rotate the swastika and have it go back to being a Hindu symbol. It already has an association that people cannot let go of. And I think that's the deeper problem in our politics right now. You have so many people that are playing around these margins and making incremental adjustments to these systems that need to be fundamentally reimagined, like healthcare, like immigration, like energy, like our military policy. And if we keep debating these fundamental incremental steps, we're going to keep sliding backwards over time. And I worry about going off the cliff where we can't retain control of our own democracy again, and it might become something very different than what the founders intended.
Let's talk about data centers. Big deal in Virginia, right? They've become both an economic engine and a source of controversy. Supporters point to jobs and AI innovation, while opponents raise concerns about energy use, water consumption, and quality of life. Where do you think the right balance is with data centers, and what role should the federal government play?
I think the federal government's role in all of this is making sure that it's a fair field between communities and data center companies. There are apocryphal stories from Virginia all over of infiltrations of HOA organizations to get more buy-in to build the next data center. There are stories of actual bribes being given to people to be more favorable on city councils or townships. Again, perception is reality. This is one thing that was important to me and all of my fellow intelligence officers at CIA. You cannot pretend like people don't perceive things a certain way, and the pendulum is swinging back against data centers. So I think the balance that needs to be struck is making them pay their fair share, no special tax incentives, no nothing, and making sure that the taxes collected from any future construction are applied to making actual human beings' lives better. It's just not right now, and until we fix that, we're gonna keep seeing the resentment towards these data centers grow. And you're going to see people throwing bricks through windows eventually. I would like to avoid that part by making business constructive with communities rather than treating them like commodities.
Okay, we are out of time. Is there a final bow you'd like to put on this interview? Anything else you'd like to say?
Anybody who cares about their country, anybody who still believes in the American experiment, go check my campaign out. I'm trying to do something different. And my pledge to not self-enrich and donate half my income back to my district when I'm in office, I think it's interesting, and I haven't found another candidate doing it. If you have found one, send it my way.
All right. Mr. Dunnigan, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am.
The 5th Democrat running for Virginia's 8th congressional district in the primary is Lorena Bruner. She has been a longtime substitute teacher for the Stafford County Public School System. She is a former military spouse of 24 years and the former vice president of public policy for the American Association of University of Women, Virginia. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Simone.
I wanted to ask you about this because you are the only woman running in this race. What made you why do you want the job?
Oh, the reason why I want the job is that, first of all, statistically, and between the Senate and Congress, the 119th Congress, there's less than 30% women that are voting members and 79% men. So we keep saying that we are representing women, we're representing you, but we really actually don't have equal representation for women in Congress. There's over 50% of women in the United States overall that are living in the United States, but yet we have like nearly 79% men that are in Congress. So we need to get closer to the 50% in Congress and the Senate.
Sure, and I thought it was interesting, your path to the campaign trail, because you entered this race expecting Virginia's congressional maps to change, right? And when the Supreme Court struck down the new maps, you stayed in this race despite the fact that your district where you live looks a little different. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, exactly that. I wanted to run for whatever district it would have been, whether it was District 7 or District 8, I just wanted to be in there to represent the people. And so when I got the opportunity to run for District 8, and I was told after I registered my signatures and stuff that, you can run in District 8 even though you don't live in it. I was amazed because Had I stayed in District 7, I found out later on, I wouldn't have had this opportunity to run for the primaries because half of those, about 9 people, were running against the incumbent, and half of those decided not to run anymore because the District 8 was no longer going to be District 8 that they wanted, but the remaining 4 wanted to run, and District 7 eliminated them. So it was, I didn't know in the future that I would still have this opportunity, but I feel very fortunate because this is what I wanted to do.
Let's talk about, we want voters to get to know you, get to know some of your agenda priorities. And so assuming you win, let's say, what are your first 2 priorities when you get into office?
My first 2 priorities is I would like to, actually, I'm interested in getting the gouging out of prices. Everything is high, food, childcare, gasoline and stuff. And the thing about it is the prices are higher because we have these tariffs, and we need to do something about that because it's hard. People are struggling. It's struggling to get to work. I mean, I'm with you there. I'm like, I can't believe every time I go to the gasoline pump, the prices are up. So how are people getting back and forth? And school is starting. People are going to have to get their kids to school and such. So that's one of the things I want to take care of.
I wanted to build off of what you just said because, you've been in the public school system, you've been a teacher. What are some of the biggest challenges that are facing Northern Virginia students and schools?
Well, keeping teachers, because teachers aren't getting paid enough and the benefits aren't there. And so, unfortunately, our children are missing out because and the thing about it is, students get attached to their teachers. They're like family.
Of course.
So when their teachers have to leave, it's a devastating, experience for them. So we need to pay our teachers more so that we can keep them in the schools. So that's one of the things right there.
Let's talk about the incumbent. You are challenging a well-known incumbent, of course, from your party, Don Beyer. And so what do you think you can bring to the table that either he is falling short on or has not done so far?
Well, what I'm bringing to the table is grassroots. The thing is, he has been, first of all, he has been in office for 10 years. And the thing is, people need new leadership. The thing is, the old leadership has to come up to date with the present. And everything has changed quite a bit. And so people need new leadership. There's a gap right now between what people need and what has been going on in the past and still going into the present. So we need new grassroots leadership. I speak to people daily on a day-to-day basis. As I'm putting out my signs in the community, I speak with the people. I talk to the people. I've been to the polls and such. And people need to get a different viewpoint, a different lens from the everyday people.
Something that I found interesting, you and I were just having a conversation before the interview started, and when you say grassroots, I mean, you mean literally. You've been going door to door, you've been talking to people on the phone, and so do you think that that has really kind of helped your campaign?
Yes, it does quite a bit because people really appreciate you. Even today, even though I live in Stafford and I'm running for office in the District 8, I still have supporters from Stafford. They still want to support me. They want to vote for me, but they can't vote for me because they're not in their same district. But they support me. They have my signs. I have signs up in Stafford, just like I have signs up here. And people come to you when they feel like, I still have people calling me, asking me, can I look into this and that for them? Because when you meet them face to face, door to door, and you tell them you really care about them, they do not forget. And so that's my point.
What has your experience been? Have you received criticism for not living in the district from voters? What's that experience been like?
Well, actually, people are surprised. They don't understand why that's the case. And so I explained to them actually how I ended up here to begin with. It wasn't like I planned it to be this way. This is what my expectation was. But with that being said, a couple of them had said, well, you don't live in the area, and so I don't understand how you could run here. Well, the thing about it is when I was in Stafford County running for political office, I didn't know a lot of Stafford County either. So it's the same thing. You have to get up, in both instances, get out there and get to know people and then talk to people. And actually Stafford and District 8, we have a lot of similarities. Everyone is hungry. Everyone's fighting with gasoline prices. Everyone is struggling for health care. So it's like we're still family. We're still neighbors. We still have the same needs.
How would you propose taking on some of those affordability issues? Because you're absolutely right. We hear that time and time again from voters who are speaking with us saying, life is too expensive. I can't afford my rent. My housing's an issue. Childcare is an issue. How would you go about tackling some of those issues, and are some of them more of a priority to you than others?
Well, one of the things that is a great concern is about all our federal workers that we've lost, that they've lost their jobs and everything. And we need to have some things put in place so that the government cannot get rid of, we need to have firewalls so they can just fire them. They can't go on strike or anything like that, you know, when they're not getting their jobs, when their jobs are taking care of them because they're merit-based. But we cannot have the government come in like the present administration and fire people. We need to have some things in place to prevent that for the future.
When you look forward and, you know, let's say you're voted into office and you have to find ways to work with the Trump administration or your Republican counterparts, you know, and perhaps let's just say Republicans still control Congress after the midterms, but you've been voted in as well. How would you go about navigating some bipartisan conversations? What would that look like for you?
Well, I have to tell you, I fell into this gift I have for reaching across the aisle. Even as a candidate in Stafford County, I have gone door to door in canvassing and talked to a person who initially would tell me, oh, I'm with the GOP. I don't think I would vote for you. But as we have a conversation, they come around, and I have experienced this often. They say, I will vote down the line for everybody, everyone on the list, GOP, but when it comes to you, I'll cross the aisle.
Why?
I think I just have this gift. I've also run into recently a candidate that's running for the GOP.
How did that
for
go?
Senate. And actually, it went quite well.
Okay.
We were able just recently, in a recent forum, and we were able to come, and that was interesting. With my gift, we were interested in coming to terms, and we talked about coming across the aisle for mutual interest. And this is as a candidate recently. So I think I can bring that forward because I know I've fallen to the fact that I have that gift of getting people to come across the aisle.
Well, listen, that would be a tremendous asset. Certainly, I know bipartisanship is such a struggle in this polarized atmosphere. I wanted to talk to you about Iran. Very big topic, right? You have experience, extensive experience advocating for military families. And as we continue to see the tension in the Middle East, what should Congress's role be in terms of the war with Iran? Do you think we should remain in conflict? Should we pull out of the war? Where are you with this?
We need to pull out the war as soon as possible. I know from personal experience what it's like to have a family member. Actually, with my children's father and I, our first tour was overseas in England, and he was a fighter pilot, a co-pilot for jets in the Air Force. And it's like whenever they go, whether it's a practice mission or it's a real mission, you don't know if they're going to come home. It's very, very scary. And so the thing is, I feel for those families. In fact, within our first year of being overseas, we lost his best friend. We went to school together. We met right out of high school and college. And one of his close friends, he was enlisted, prior enlisted, is going through ROTC with us. And we both went overseas to England. And within the first year, he was a really nice young man. He was in his prime, he was in his early 30s. He got married, had a family, and his plane was shot down. And that was, and my kid's father was overseas on a training mission in the States. So my thing is, I know what it's like. I feel firsthand for the family members who have lost their loved ones in this war. Sure. And also what really irks me a bit too is respect for the military and its regimen and its rules and regulations. Hegseth should not have his wife alongside, inside this personal military business. That is unacceptable. She should, and I'm reading possibly that she's trying to get a clearance and everything like that. She should have no business in his business in the military. And also, none of the administration should be living in generals and colonels' housing. That's earned. So these little things, because I come from the military's perspective, I see that's happening among the other things that are completely you know, completely out of line, should not be happening because they're eroding the respect for the military.
I see. Let's talk about health care. We've got a lot of ground to cover still. My understanding is that you support Medicare for all. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
That's correct.
That would require a major restructuring of the healthcare system, right? This, no doubt, you know this. How do you propose paying for it? If you look down the road and you're trying to figure out how this all comes together, where does that money come from?
Well, I think, you know, we can look at the income level, because if you're below a certain income, you know, I think that it doesn't hurt if everyone pays a percentage. Maybe the higher your income, the more percentage you pay. But the thing is, everyone needs health care. And so I think it could be like a percentage, or maybe below a certain income, you pay next to none. It's similar to with the military. If you go into the hospital, say you have a child or a baby or whatever, your pay, say per day. I'm going to use having a baby, for example, many years ago when I was in the military. For an officer, it's like $25 a day when you're in the hospital. But if you're enlisted, it could have been like 10. So I'm just saying, you know, appropriate it according to what your income level is. Okay. And the higher should be the higher percentage you could pay.
As we run out of time and as we round out our interview, what would you like to say to voters who maybe are still getting to know you and in the final days of the campaign?
Well, my name is Lorena Bruner, and I'm running for Congress for District 8. I'm running for women and families across the board, and I would love you to have your vote. Thank you very much.
All right. Ms. Bruner, thank you so much for coming in today, for the conversation. I appreciate it. And I'd like to thank all of the candidates for sharing their vision for Virginia's 8th Congressional District. Just a reminder, primary day is Tuesday, August 4th, and the winner of the Democratic primary will face Republican challenger Tony Sabio in November. If you'd like more information about this race or any of the others in Virginia, just head on over to our website, WUSA9.com. You can check out our voter guide there. Have a great rest of your day, and don't forget to vote.